Controversy sells books. I mean, you deliberately controversial in order to get this flying off the bookshelves.
It honestly never crossed my mind when I began writing this book that I would depart from more or less the orthodoxy which prevails in most scientific departments in British and American universities. It was only as I came to read up the subject that I realised that there's actually tremendous divergence of opinion among scientists for a start. I haven't said that Darwin is a charlatan. I didn't say that. What I did say...
That was my word, not yours.
That was your word. And I don't think he was a charlatan, and I think he was a very great naturalist. I mean, probably the greatest naturalist since Pliny.
But Simon
I do think some of his ideas, particularly the idea when transferred into what's called social Darwinism, of the survival of the fittest, has had a disastrous history. I know you write about this sometimes, Simon, in The Guardian, and you defend him. He was profoundly racist. His great forebear, his grandfather, Josiah Wedgwood, made a plaque during the campaign to abolish slavery. Am I not a man and a brother of an African man in chains? And I think Charles Darwin's answer to that would have been no, quite honestly.
Simon Underdown, it's perfectly possible for someone who's not a scientist to have a rational view of Darwin.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where to begin really with what Andrew's just said. I mean, we could start with the assertion that Darwin was a racist. There is nothing in Darwin's writings. There is no written documentation to back that up as a statement.
Well, I mean, come.
He makes a couple
of... The Descent of Man, in which he makes...
He does make a couple of statements in his journals on the Voyage of the Beagle, which could be regarded in modern light as being somewhat controversial. But what we see with Darwin through his work is a progression of a man's ideas that change over time, and certainly suggests that if Darwin was presented with the question, am I not a man, am I not a brother, he would say no.
What offends you most?
No, but Chelsea and Simon, in The Descent of Man, Darwin quite clearly states that savages, brown people, people such as the human beings he met on Tierra del Fuego, don't have a proper language, for example. He says they have hardly any vocabulary. When the missionaries went there to start a dictionary, they discovered a complex language with a vocabulary of 38,000 words.
Absolutely. I mean, if I may, Tierra del Fuego is an extremely interesting point. The missionaries Andrew's referring to, the Bridges family, did in fact find a very complex language. But Darwin's ideas were...
He said they didn't have a language, they spoke in
were very
grunts.
Juvenile, and they changed over time. When you look at the science that changes over time with Darwin, what you see is a man whose ideas are incredibly sophisticated, they change, and the beauty of Darwin's work, which I think Andrew has not come to grips with in the book at all, I think Andrew is suffering from profound misunderstanding of the way evolution works, is that Darwin's ideas are based on empirically testable data. All of the components of natural selection can be taken apart, empirically tested, demonstrated to be true, and put back together.
It's a very... I mean, the great appeal of Darwin, the theory of natural selection, is its simplicity. So to say I haven't understood it, if I may say so, is absurd. It's terribly easy to understand. The trouble with it, Darwin himself says that the existence of complex forms can't really be explained by his theory. And if his theory can't be shown to demonstrate, for example, how an eye comes into being, then the whole theory collapses. And that is really what happens. And then the other thing which I must say...
What is it if it's not evolution? I mean, you're a believer, you have faith, is it creationism?
Of course evolution takes place. Of course it does. But it takes place within species. And the idea that one species has evolved into another is simply not demonstrated by the origin of species.
Evolution does not take place within species. Darwin effectively talks about gradualism, and this is another point that Andrew has misunderstood. Darwin's gradualism is essentially talking about the way that variation builds up in time and then things change.
The fact you don't believe something doesn't mean you misunderstood it.
It's not evolution that's taking place within the species itself.
Thank you both very much indeed.